Greetings, everyone. For just a few moments, I want to use selected verses from Psalm 77 to speak with us from the subject Answers to Life's Troubling Questions. Psalm 77 is an interesting statement of what can pass through the mind of the author and what may therefore pass through any of our minds as it relates to what we feel God is or is not doing. The psalm was evidently composed in a time of affliction, and the thoughts which gave rise to the author that gave him so much trouble and which he endeavors to calm down were such as were suggested by affliction, by the fact that God seemed to have forgotten or forsaken the psalmist and that God had forgotten to be gracious. You and I are comforted through the hard times that we endure by remembering God's help in the past. Recalling God's miracles and God's previous works can give us courage to continue. When we take a moment and reflect on just how far God has brought us, we are empowered to go on just a little while longer. The psalmist in our text does three things. The psalmist agonizes, asks, and answers. Listen to these agonizing words in verses 1 through 3. I cry out to God. Yes, I shout. Oh, that God would listen to me. When I was in deep trouble, I searched for the Lord. All night long I prayed, with my hands lifted toward heaven, but my soul was not comforted. I think of God and I moan, overwhelmed with longing for his help. As the psalm writer agonizes over present condition, she or he is too stressed to sleep or even to pray. Thoughts of former days and happier times fill the mind constantly. A comparison between then and now is made, which drives the psalmist to ask some difficult and troubling questions in verses 7 through 9. Has the Lord rejected me forever? Will he never again be kind to me? Is his unfailing love gone forever? Have his promises permanently failed? Has God forgotten to be gracious? Has he slammed the door on his compassion? Notice, if you will, that even as the psalmist asks these troubling questions, answers come forth as God's goodness is recalled. Listen to these comments. And I said, this is my fate. The Most High has turned his hand against me. But then I recall all you have done, O Lord. I remember your wonderful deeds of long ago. They are constantly in my thoughts. I cannot stop thinking about your mighty works. O God, your ways are holy. Is there any God as mighty as you? You are the God of great wonders. You demonstrate your awesome power among the nations. By your strong arm, you redeem your people, the descendants of Jacob and Joseph. The psalm writer asks the troubling questions in verses 7 through 9, either from captivity in Babylon or as a result of going through some personal agony. Answers to those troubling questions were found when the psalmist pressed rewind in the experience of God's people. The deliverance of the children of Israel from Egypt's bondage by way of the Red Sea was just one instance of God's mighty hand moving on Israel's behalf. By recalling this miraculous event, the psalmist is assured that if God delivered before, God could do it again. If God delivered then, God can deliver now. The psalmist could then conclude that there is no God like our God. Maybe you are experiencing some of life's trials and tribulations, and you have questions too. You haven't abandoned your faith, but you do have some questions. You realize that God has blessed you tremendously, but you still have some questions. You're trying very hard to fight the good fight of faith, but you still have some questions. I hear you, and so does God. But please hear this. If you have questions, remember, Jesus said, ask and it shall be given to you. Seek and you shall find. Knock and the door will be open unto you. If you have questions as to whether Jesus is still with you as you go through, remember that Jesus said, I will never leave you or forsake you. If you have questions as to whether Jesus has forsaken you as you try to find your way, remember Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except by me. If you have questions as to whether Jesus has secured an eternal home for you, remember Jesus said, I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there you may be also. If you have questions as to where and who Jesus is, remember Jesus says, I am Alpha and Omega, the first and the last. As a matter of fact, Jesus is everywhere all the time. If you have questions about your salvation, remember that Jesus said, I am the bread of life, baked in heaven's oven and served on the table of regeneration. The Apostle Paul reminds us that if we confess with our mouths the Lord Jesus and believe in our heart that God raised him from the dead, we shall be saved. If you have questions as you grope through the darkness of your present experiences, remember that Jesus said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness. If you have questions as to who it is who's leading and guiding you through this depressive and despairing moments that you have to experience right now, Jesus said, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. If you have questions as to how long you have to go through what you're presently going through, remember that the psalmist reminded us that weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. If you have troubling questions, and I'm sure you do, Jesus has the answer. How do I know that Jesus has the answer? Jesus has the answer because Jesus is the answer. God bless you.